Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to The History of Horror Cinema, a personal podcast journey through the good, bad, and ugly of the history of horror movies, based on my blog, The History of Horror Cinema. Oh, and please don't forget to hit subscribe. Lon Chaney, Part 5. The Monster, 1925. At the age of 40, Lon Chaney was at last a deserved superstar. But with his long-ingrained work ethic there was to be no complacency. Obviously, in a busy schedule, no performer can guarantee the highest quality in every project they agree to. And this was the case in Chaney's next role, a botched blend of horror and dark humor in The Monster, released by director Roland West's production company Tech Art and distributed by MGM. This may have given the mistaken impression it was an MGM film, but it lacked the talent of such a prestigious studio. The Monster had an intriguing premise to attract Chaney, that of a former surgeon of repute, Dr. Gustav Ziska, who takes over the sanatorium asylum in which he is revealed to actually be one of its insane patients. However, we have to wait over 30 minutes for him to appear, whilst we tread water through a convenience store love triangle between Amos Rugg, Hallam Cooley, Gertrude Olmsted as the owner's daughter Betty, and Johnny Goodlittle, Johnny Arthur, who was later suited to more epicene roles than these lame heroics. The interstitial cards aim for wry laughs and miss with tepid remarks such as deriding Amos, who blew into town and has been blowing ever since. Investigating the disappearance of a wealthy farmer, Correspondence Course Detective Johnny goes to the sanatorium along with Betty and Amos to search for clues. Chaney makes a darkly suave entrance as Dr. Ziska, with white hair and fluffy, eccentric white eyebrows concealing mangled teeth, whilst sporting a frock coat and affecting a cigarette holder like a sinister Noel Coward. Another attempt at quality by association is naming his servant as Caliban, Walter James, Shakespeare's primitive manservant from The Tempest, although here James's oiled bare chest and earring suggest more a gypsy circus artist. Chaney commands as much as he can, but the material allows him no chance to be Shakespeare's magician Prospero here, and the outside torrent fails to remind us this is no more than a storm in a teacup. Our three heroes survive fiendish traps laid by Ziska and his other henchman, Knut Eriksson's Daffy Dan, and the mad monk Rigo, played by George Austin. Amongst these distractions, a couple of brief high points are the sight of Betty saved from being crushed by a mechanical weight, only to be gripped by unidentified hands as her bed retracts to unseen depths, while Amos is about to be clobbered from behind by the fearsome friar before a cut to black. By the time Johnny finds the asylum's owner, Dr. Edwards, Herbert Pryor, and the missing farmer, we are given the big reveal of Ziska's true status. Yet truthfully we are past caring, as the plot descends into standard mad scientist hack work. "At last, the fools have brought me a woman," declaims the interstitial card, as Ziska crows over Betty, strapped to an operating table. He is about to experiment on her to crack the old chestnut of the secret of life, "Rigo, my knives!" yet instead is forced into his own death chair by Caliban, and mercifully Chaney is electrocuted out of the movie. It only remains for Johnny to hoist Caliban up, ready trust for the police. A clunky epilogue has Betty and Johnny together in a car. She stares up at him doe-eyed in admiration with the line, "How can I ever be worthy of a wonderful man like y'all?" This reads like a weak parody of Deep South folks, but at least serves to remind us that the monster ultimately isn't worthy of us nor Lon Chaney. The Unholy Three, 1925. Happily, Universal honored the promise they made before Phantom, and after the misfire of the monster, they gave him a 1-year contract with options that would return him to worthy projects under the wise mentorship of Irving Thalberg. The first title under this arrangement was to be another of Lon's masterpieces, the circus folk crime thriller The Unholy Three, directed once again by the masterful Todd Browning, whose affinity for the material went back to his childhood. Browning ran away to join a circus at age 16 and submerged himself in the life of circuses and carnivals. He worked as a barker and a performer, at one time being buried alive under the stage name The Living Corpse. Like his later famous horror film Freaks, in The Unholy Three, Browning focused on the lives of circus people, but whereas the former film would earn sympathy for those regarded as abnormal, in this film the performers used their unusual natural talents for criminal purposes. Chaney plays Echo, a gifted ventriloquist, who teams up with two of his fellow sideshow performers to rob people. His cohorts are future John Ford John Wayne regular Victor McLaglen as strongman Hercules, and the little person Tweedledee, played by adult Harry Earls, who went on to appear vividly in Freaks and as one of the Munchkins in MGM's The Wizard of Oz. The fourth member of the gang is the formidable man's woman Mae Bush, who later became such an intimidatingly great foil for Laurel and Hardy. She is Echo's pickpocket girlfriend Rosie. Together they hatch elaborate con tricks to set up robberies, by selling pets to rich people from their store, in this case a parrot which only talks when Echo is present to throw his voice. They set up a premise for visiting the buyer, when a complaint is made that the bird no longer speaks once brought home. Echo poses as the convincingly genteel little old lady Mrs. O'Grady, Rosie's mother, and Tweedledee is disguised as her baby grandson. This adds a sense of deceptive fun to the caper, especially as Earls has an amusing touch of the W.C. Fields curmudgeon about him, which he buries believably in his baby grow. Once at the buyer's home, the three discover the owner has a valuable ruby necklace, which they covet. Unbeknownst to Echo, Hercules and Tweedledee go ahead and commit the robbery without him, murdering the owner and injuring his toddler daughter. This enrages Echo, as, hard-bitten and ruthless though he appears, he would never have taken a gun to a robbery to avoid just such awful consequences. A memorably suspenseful scene takes place when a detective interviews the adult twosome, during which Tweedledee secretes the necklace in a toy elephant. The policeman hears the rattling and almost opens the elephant, but his attention is misdirected by Hercules. The gang plant the jewelry in the room of Hector, Rosie's bookish boob fiancé, a nice turn by Matt Moore. Rosie is kidnapped by the boys for fear of her spilling the beans on them. More potential double-crosses rear up among the thieves, between Tweedledee and Hercules, and then a suggestion by Hercules to Rosie. This results in the little person letting loose their large pet ape upon him, but Tweedledee is strangled by the strong man before the ape can get him. Rosie pleads with Echo to free Hector, in return vowing to stay with him and never see her fiancé again. We then witness a terrific courtroom climax, with Chaney writhing in mental anguish as he attempts to find a way to get Hector off the hook without incriminating himself. Finally, his unlikely conscience strikes again, and he uses his ventriloquial talent to confess while Hector silently mouths for him on the witness stand. Both men are equally acquitted on the grounds that the actual perpetrators are now dead. While Rosie makes to honor her agreement with Echo, he is shrewd and kind enough to recognize that her heart belongs to Victor, and releases her to go after him, with no ill will and a touching farewell spoken via his doll. The Unholy Three is a wonderfully satisfying film, not in the horror genre as such, but with enough dark plotting and suspense to be worthy of Hitchcock. It contains a great central performance of villainy with a heart of gold from Chaney, another in his powerful gallery of men who sacrifice all for an unrequited love, as well as a dual role portraying an elderly lady. But also there is revelatory playing from Mae Bush. If, like me, you only know her work as the frosty dragon wife or mistress to Stan and Ollie, here she reveals a tender vulnerability, especially in the moving scene where she breaks down at the thought of losing Hector and confesses her guilty lifestyle to him. Todd Browning also found the film to be a great career move for him. His alcoholism had almost ruined him before Thalberg trusted his talent enough to give him a chance to redeem himself with this story. Freaks would consolidate his return in 1932. And finally in this section, a brief word about Tell It to the Marines in 1926. Amongst Lon Chaney's other highlights in his new home at Universal was this remarkable U.S. Marine tale, famous for proving to all that Chaney didn't need elaborate makeup to create an unforgettable role. Here he plays Sergeant O'Hara, the very model of the tough drill sergeant who bullies rookie wise guy recruit Skeet Burns, an excellent William Haynes, into shape from a ne'er-do-well into a man, along the way revealing that under that granite exterior is a good-hearted man who loves his platoon and would do anything for them. A plot idea later used highly effectively in An Officer and a Gentleman and Clint Eastwood's Heartbreak Ridge. Chaney deftly switches between the motivating tyrant and a softer side with Burns's nurse sweetheart, Eleanor Boardman. Every Chaney fan should see this film to appreciate his awesome range as a straight dramatic actor, not simply a genre star. Directed confidently by George W. Hill, who went on to have huge hits with The Big House and Min and Bill, this was the first film to gain cooperation from the U.S. Marine Corps. Many later films would be refused such assistance, owing to portrayals of the military that were not ultimately favorable. However, Tell It to the Marines was so glowing a tribute to the soldiers that Chaney was the first actor to be granted honorary membership of the Corps, an honor of which he was very proud.